This is the 2018 iPad Pro, and I truly believe this is the best Apple product Apple has ever created in years. Here's why. Now, before we even get into that, we got to go all the way back in time of October 2018, Apple's keynote. This is truly one of my favorite keynotes of all time. This keynote was taking place in downtown Brooklyn, New York. So the energy was just right. You guys know I live in New York. Crowd was just cheering on. We had an exciting product such as the brand new MacBook Air, which was a long-awaited refresh because prior to this, it was the same old aluminum 2008 design. That was the year that we actually got a redesign of the MacBook Air, introducing what we know and love today, which we are going to see a redesign this year, 2022. And on top of that, we had the Mac Mini, which we thought it was going to be discontinued altogether, but nonetheless, we had a beefier Mac Mini, which was cool to see. And then we had the Coupe de Gras, the iPad Pro 2018. And man, when Apple showed off the trailer, I was literally smiling. Now, when this keynote was taking place, I was in class, graphic design, and I was watching it on my iPad Pro first generation 9.7 inch. I had only one AirPod in one ear listening to the event while I was listening to the lecture. Man, you guys don't understand. I take my Apple stuff very seriously. That was one of my favorite Apple events. Like, people around me, they knew I was a YouTuber. I make YouTube videos for years. But this iPad here was a big deal. I'm not going to bore you guys with all the specifications, but just looking at it and tell, this looked like something that came out this year. The design is such ahead of its time that Apple is still using the design to this day. So even if you buy a 2018 iPad Pro now, you're not going to be out the loop. And let's not forget, it has the buttery smooth 120 hertz ProMotion display. All this display tech and all this power is just featured in this thin chassis, which is only 5.9 millimeters, and it's enough to still hold the Apple Pencil 2nd generation. No more the days of plugging it into the bottom, which, speaking of the bottom, we have that Type-C port. Man, Apple hit home run with this one. With that Type-C port, you could plug in your iPhone, charge it up. And also, you could plug in dongles, so you could plug in SD cards, USB-A. So the design aged like fine wine. But we thought that the iPhone was going to get Type-C eventually, since this was the first iPad to have Type-C. But unfortunately, Apple, please give us Type-C on the iPhone. And the speakers are just jaw-dropping. It sounds like you have a Bluetooth speaker paired up. I was excited to unbox it. I made a video on it. I throw a link in the description, and I actually reviewed it. But at the time, couldn't really afford anything. Money was pretty tight, so I decided to return it. And that was a mistake. I returned it in 2018, and I missed it. So in 2020, I decided to purchase it again. And that's why I made another review. But come to think about it, it was a good thing that I returned it because it only had 64 gigabytes and it was only Wi-Fi. I'm a big Wi-Fi plus cellular guy, and 256 is the sweet spot when it comes down to Apple devices, in my humble opinion. But then 2020 of January, I picked it up again in cellular and in 256 for practically brand new. It was eBay refurbished. And not to mention, this iPad doesn't even have a notch, because we were speculating that this iPad may have a notch because of the Face ID scanner, but man, we was wrong. Everything is all within that bezel. So you have support for Memoji, Face ID, you have that true depth camera system right embedded into the bezel. And I went with the 11-inch just because of the portability aspect. That was before the iPad Mini 6. We're going to talk more about that in a little bit. I wanted to be able to carry this around with me, take it with me on the go. It turns out the iPad Mini is like a smaller version of the iPad Pro, minus in that 120 hertz refresh rate. Now I want to talk about that processor, the A12X Bionic chip. That processor is so good, in fact, that Apple featured it again in the 2020 iPad Pro, featuring the A12Z chip. And the only difference is, I kid you not, same as that clock speed CPU, the GPU, you just have one extra GPU core on the 2020 iPad Pro with the A12Z Bionic chip. That is it. It was not until the M1 that we got a major performance increase. But even with that performance increase, the 2018 iPad Pro is still handling everything like a champ. Video editing, photo editing, launching up multiple apps. Everything just handles it well. Now, yes, the M1 is faster, but the 2018 iPad is no slouch. I happened to unbox the 2020 iPad Pro and I liked it, but it wasn't that big leap how the 2018 iPad Pro was. And even last year's iPad, the M1, not enough changes. Yes, the mini LED is a screen change, but you have the blooming issues and it wasn't that big wow factor. The 2018 iPad Pro with that A12 Bionic chip was so powerful, ahead of its time, that Apple put it in a Mac Mini for a developer kit for Big Sur. So this is when Apple was transitioning to the Apple Silicon. And even so, when the iPhone 11 came out with the A13 Bionic chip, the A12X was still powerful. That just shows you, man, this was in a league of its own. This literally is the absolute champ, even to this day.
To this day!
The thing is, the design was so good that it was transferred over to other iPads, like the iPad Mini. I'm still using my iPad Mini, absolutely love this. And even with the iPad Air, it's just incredible. And I'm curious to see how Apple is gonna top it off. I'm waiting for that next big leap. If you're looking forward to buying a premium iPad without breaking the bank, the 2018, whether if it's the 11-inch or the 12.9-inch, the 2018 iPad Pro is the way to go. ProMotion is still here, quad speakers, you're getting everything. Type-C, it is a bargain, and especially you can get it at the Apple Refurbished, certified refurbished store for like $5.99 for the 11-inch. It is a bargain, and matter of fact, that's probably the same price as the iPad Air. So why buy the iPad Air when you could get the iPad Pro 11-inch? That is a way better deal than the iPad Air. And I would say, in my opinion, you'll probably get maybe another 4 to 5 years of iPad OS updates, which is fantastic. It's already incredible now because the iPad 2018 is approaching to 4 years now. And this iPad right here, it changed the game for Apple. Some would say the iPhone. Yes, I agree. The iPhone did change the game for Apple, but for something that you can buy right now that's still kicking ass today, this is it. This is truly it. Now, this is definitely going to be a device that I'm going to keep and I'm going to remember forever. I'm going to remember when Apple introduced this iPad, and I'm going to remember how impactful this device is. No matter what the situation is, I'm going to forever keep this iPad. My next iPad Pro will definitely be a 12.9-inch next time, just thanks to the fact of the iPad Mini being so tiny and small and compact. So it just makes sense to get the larger iPad Pro. That's probably my only regret, maybe. But other than that, iPad Pro, love it. And then pairing that up with more accessories such as the Magic Keyboard case. We didn't have that back in 2018. They just gave us that in 2020, and that's still compatible with the 2018 iPad Pro. Then just today, we have universal control. It's a feature where you can move your mouse cursor from your Mac to your iPad. So you're still getting these amazing features even on an older iPad. So guys, that pretty much concludes today's video. Just sharing my love for the 2018 iPad Pro, just appreciating it every little bit, from the keynote presentation to the release until having all these features now in 2022, and who knows, we might even get more next year. I can't predict the future, but thank you, Apple, for creating the 2018 iPad Pro. It changes the way how I use my iPad forever. Because coming from the first gen iPad Pro, this essentially was the overhaul. If you guys remember the iPad 2, everybody had one. Essentially, this is the iPad 2 of 2022. The iPad Pro 2018 is the new iPad 2. It's going to be reliable. It's going to just be the one, just the go-to. This is it.